Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Dr. Steve Yacovelli, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story. And our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about what you're doing with Top Doc Learning Group and all the amazing things that you're doing to help people. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you for creating this space, Mike. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So where were you born?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia back in the 70s and 80s, so I can date myself as well. I was the youngest of three kids, parents, blue collar workers. Dad worked in the same factory for his entire career as a tool and die maker. Mom had a couple jobs, but her main job throughout my childhood was a secretary at an elementary school. So that's the first time I understood what leadership was, because my mom ran that school. And if you have any admin people in your life, any secretaries, office managers, they usually run where they're at. It's not the boss, it's their boss.
Right. Yeah. It's that old title thing is like, see ya, right?
Totally. Yeah. And like I said, not to foreshadow, but that's when I started realizing, leadership's about influence. It's not about title or how many people report to you. And so that was a cool lesson to learn pretty early on. And like I said, youngest of three. I have an older brother, middle sister, and me.
Cool. So outside of Philadelphia, is there a city you grew up in?
Yeah, no one will know it unless you're from the burbs. It's called Pottstown, Pennsylvania. It's just past King of Prussia, Valley Forge.
Gotcha.
Depending on traffic, it's about 45 minutes into Center City.
So you said it's by King of Prussia?
Yeah, that's where we go school shopping for clothes every year.
So fun fact, my dad, 40 some years ago, went to work for a company called Maaco, M-A-A-C-O.
Okay.
Based in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Yeah. I had never heard of that place ever in my life, right? And all of a sudden, my dad's flying back there. He lands. He goes into the corporate headquarters. They hire him on the spot. Okay. He meets the founder of the company, the whole thing. Nice. And we end up moving to California from Oklahoma. And Maaco paid for the move. Maaco moved us here.
Yep.
And we've never left. It was almost 45 years ago. So
that's funny.
Crazy.
Yeah,
man. It completely changed our lives.
And King of Prussia was named in honor of the King of Prussia from the Revolutionary War, who helped support the troops.
Isn't that cool? I love that. That is so cool. Okay. I've never met anybody from there or around there. You know what I mean? So this is cool.
That's funny.
So growing up there, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I didn't realize it until having moved out of the area. I now live in Orlando, Florida. And, when I was a kid, it was nothing for us to go to Valley Forge. And at the time, because now it's since changed, but at the time you could just walk right into all the leftover log cabins that the soldiers made. And we would just play. We dig for like stuff. Now, of course, there's gates on it. You can't do that.
Right.
But, in the US, at least, people were like, well, how old's your house? And our house is not too old, but my friend's house is from the 1700s. Like, whoa, that's so old. And then I moved to Florida, and like, how old's your house? Ooh, the 1950s. Ooh, that's really old. And so getting that perspective, I think, was really neat. And of course, led to really having a passion for American history, Revolutionary War history as a kid, and going and studying Ben Franklin and all that fun stuff. I think that's something I didn't appreciate until I left. But then I'd go to Europe and I'd be like, how old's your house? Oh, it was built in the 1400s. Like, oh my gosh, we have nothing on this.
No kidding. What a change of perspective, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Probably both my parents, actually, for different reasons. Like my dad, like I said, he spent his career as a tool and die maker. Probably one of the
Mhm.
smartest people I know. Like very, very awesome at problem solving,
Yeah.
and that was kind of one of those things that really rubbed off on me. And it's not just how to solve like jigsaw puzzles and things. I'd be like, Dad, my car's making this funny noise. He's like, what's it sound like? Oh, it's like this. Like, let me think about it. And he'd go to his workbench and he'd even invent things all the time. And he'd go to work and he's like, here, I made this. Let's see if this fixes it. And he would. My dad, he's really, really smart, but he's also very creative.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where the problem solving ties in. So when I look at some of the things that I do in my business, trying to solve problems for clients and all that, I think I definitely get that from my dad, as well as his weird, stupid, awesome humor. I've definitely had that as well. And my mom just had this awesome, and my dad too, but my mom had this great work ethic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing that kind of carries over is the work ethic, and then also the ability to listen to folks
Yeah.
and just listen, as Stephen Covey says, listen to understand versus listen
Mhm.
to respond, to kind of paraphrase his stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. He's on it, man. I love Stephen Covey. So, and by the way, that's an ongoing conversation we're having in this podcast is, people nowadays think that young people in particular nowadays think that a conversation is I'm talking and you're listening, but you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next. Right. And that's not what it is.
No,
And
not at all.
Covey was on it, right? It's like
Yeah.
you listen to understand and you ask about what they just said to dig and get specific, right? And figure it out. And so, what young people think a conversation is today is technically what a debate is. And so
Exactly.
it's not, right? So if we're going to be able to communicate with each other, we've got to get to a place to where we get back to or we learn active listening.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. So in high
Absolutely.
school, so in high
Just real quick,
school,
absolutely, that's exactly what we teach in all of our leadership programming is the
beautiful.
strategy of listening and what good leaders do that. So yes,
Love that. Love that.
yep.
And it's a big, big deal, by the way. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Actually, math. I was
Yeah.
really, really good at math. I was going to be a math teacher at one point, and that's actually what I applied to college for. I obviously
Wow.
did not do that, but math came pretty easily to me. And I also did a lot of extracurricular things. And in my high school, band was a class, so we 5 days a week, symphonic band, and we did marching band, and and people listening or people watching might be like, "Oh, band geek," and yes, I will own that to the day I die. I loved band. Matter of fact, I just went up to a lot of the folks who we kind of did an impromptu high school reunion. It's a milestone year, if you will. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like an official one. It was just the people we wanted to hang out with.
Yeah.
And so we're all over the country, and actually a couple are abroad, and they're like, we're the cool kids that were in the band, and we were like the nerdy academics, and a couple were football players, and our high school was pretty darn unique in that respect.
It's amazing. I know people that had high schools. We didn't have this in our high school, but I know people that were in high school and the football players were also in the band.
Yeah, totally.
And so at halftime, they're out there with their shoulder pads and their uniform, right? No helmet,
Absolutely.
right? And they're out there playing the
Yep.
instrument, doing their thing. They hand the
Yep.
instrument back, put their helmet on, and back to the third quarter.
Absolutely. That was my high
Crazy,
school.
man.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting way to learn to grow up.
Yeah.
So after high school, where do you go?
So I ended up not studying math, but I was initially accepted as a math ed teacher at Millersville University, Pennsylvania. It's one of the state schools in PA, and I also did theater as a kid, and I was one of the women she was a year ahead of me, came back to see the show and whatever we were doing that fall, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a communications major." I'm like, "What's that?" She's like, "Oh, it's public speaking, it's radio, it's TV production." I'm like, "That sounds cooler than math."
Yeah.
So I decided to go that route. So I wrote to the university and said, "Hey, I want to switch my major." They're like, "That's fine." So I actually went to Millersville and as a speech communication public relations major,
Ooh,
and did
cool.
that for 4 years. Yeah, and it was great. I mean, what's funny is you talk to people, and it's like, "Are you using your degrees?" And so I'm like, "Nah, I'm not using it. I'm using every one of my 3 degrees," which is kind of cool. So that being one of them as a professional speaker, that speech communication stuff kind of came in handy.
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome, man. Lay the foundation, right?
Yeah, right.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What was it that made you want to initially become a math teacher?
I grew up in a family of teachers. My mom having at least worked adjacent to teachers. My sister ended up being an art teacher.
Oh,
And so, just always had teachers around. And I mean, as a little kid, as a little nerd as I was, I would play school and I would be the teacher as, when I was in fourth grade or whatever. So that was always something that I gravitated toward. And what's funny is, looking at my career, I am a teacher. It's just not what I thought I would be a teacher in,
Right.
corporate education, which is, I think, a bit more fun.
Yeah.
But there was something about that safety and understanding of that environment too, and that was kind of what led me to be able to say, yeah, I think I want to hang out and teach people how to be better at stuff.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. So you graduate from college
Hmm.
with a degree in speech,
Yep.
and there was something else, right? So
Public relations. Yeah.
public relations. Okay.
Yep.
So after you graduate, do you continue on with your education, or do you go to work somewhere?
No, so all throughout college, my dream was to work for Disney. I always
Oh,
said,
cool.
like, everyone knew that. Like, that was just the half big joke. Oh, Steve's going to go work for Mickey. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
And all my fraternity brothers like, oh, you're going to be in Florida. Let's go and get tattoos. And I'm like, okay. And I get a Mickey Mouse tattoo. I'm like, that's just how nerdy I was.
Mm.
So after I graduated from undergrad and kind of ran the summer out, just working and collecting money, I packed up my little Ford Escort with anything I could fit in it, bike attached to the back, and drove down to Orlando, Florida. And I had arranged to live with a friend of a friend of a friend, basically someone I had no idea who they were, and didn't have a job. So I went knocking on the door, got a temp job at some law firm, just like filing things just to start making cash flow. But then eventually did get a job at the Walt Disney World in Central Reservations. And so
Cool.
totally date myself, this is pre-internet, friends, if you
Yeah.
don't remember that. And the only way you could get information was to call a central number, 407 W Disney. And I was one of 499 other folks answering that call.
Wow.
And the coolest part was, I remember, and it was pretty long and intensive training process. And there was a class, I think we were about 40 folks that they kind of waited, hired 40, and then they sent you through this 6-week training program where you had to learn everything about everything at the Walt Disney Company, Walt Disney World. And I remember one day in class, our trainer, who I'm still friends with to this day, Rose, if you're listening, you're awesome. But I get this piece of paper and says, if you see your name in column A, you need to pick a new name in column B. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, everyone on the floor has to have a unique name. So that if a guest calls and says, oh, I spoke to Steve, well, if there was 12 Steves on the floor, they wouldn't know which one it was.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone had a unique name, and some were just kind of common. I actually picked the name Ethan just because it sounded like Steven and I could remember it. But we had, like, I worked with Cricket and I worked with Belle, and like people who had to pick some of the names from characters and stuff.
Right,
But
Jasmine, right? Yeah.
Jasmine, yeah. This is pre-Aladdin, so we didn't have Jasmine.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm dating myself. Right?
Dating yourself, yeah. But so it was a really interesting experience. It was actually a really cool experience to understand. It was my first time understanding a corporate workplace that's really different than what you'd expect.
Yeah.
It's not that it wasn't lovely, but it was very, very, very regimented. It had to be. We are a call center, and they had that data. So I would walk in to sign in and like, oh, Steve, your breaks today are like 10:12 to 10:22 for your 10 minutes in the morning. I'm like, what? That's so exact. Well, they knew that's when, statistically call volume would be lower, so I could get off the phones. And it just, you have in your mind like, oh, Disney is just going to be so much fun and you're just gonna have a great time the whole time, and it was fun, but it was work.
Yeah.
So so that was my first gig after undergrad.
So what was your favorite thing about working for Disney?
Well, actually, I did twice. I worked twice, so I'll tell you about the second time, which is a little bit different later. But at that time, it was really just getting exposed to the property and really having just this pass to be able to do whatever you wanted. Because you could get into all the parks as a cast member, as you wanted. You could walk at any of the resorts, and at the time, that was really magical to me. And so just I remember that Thanksgiving, we had dinner at a friend's house, and then 3 of us went like, let's go get ice cream at where we go, the Grand Floridian. We're like, okay. We just drove over, went right on, got ice cream, and kind of had our thing. And it was pretty cool being able to have that access.
That's cool. What's the number one thing that was most unexpected working there?
So as I said, this is pre-internet, but we did have and this pre-Windows, so completely dating myself. This is 1993-ish. And so we had these terminals, which were DOS based. If you have no idea what I said, Google it.
Right.
but they were called fingertip facts. It's just this massive database, and it's kind of like a very, very early Google.
Mhm.
And so people would call up, and a lot of times people would call from the parks. They would find a
Yeah.
payphone, call the 407W Disney number, and they would ask things like, so where's the nearest bathroom?
Yeah.
And so I could type in, well, where are you standing? Oh, if you turn around about 3 spaces down, you're going to see, you turn here and then you'll see, oh, thank you. But my favorite thing was, and this is where like humans just fascinate me. They said that our trainer said, do not be surprised if you get a call from a guest at the park who asked, I'm not lying, this is absolutely true, what time is the 3 o'clock parade? And we're, because we're all laughing. They're like, one, don't laugh because you want to respect the guest. But two, and if you typed it in the fingertip facts in the database, you would have your little spiel, your little script, and it would say we had to say 2:45. One, and I thought that was really brilliant. One, you don't make the guest feel stupid because it is not a really intelligent question if you think about it. Like, when's
No
the War of
kidding.
1812? Yeah, when's the War of
Right.
1812? So there's that. But also, if you told them, oh, it's 15 minutes earlier, they would go and get a nice spot and they get settled in and then the parade would start. So it was actually pretty funny, but that just always stuck out at me. Like, humans are really interesting. And so if you can be respectful when someone asks a question that really isn't as brilliant as you would expect it to be, still be respectful and answer the question as best you can.
Yeah. So, people like to say that they have a thing called baby brain, right? Right. And it's true when you're a parent, when your floor around your legs is just moving all the time, no matter where you are, right? Because you've got little ones that are just bouncing off the walls, and they just had one of those Disney hot fudge sundae things, and
Mickey heads. Oh.
Right. And you're trying to keep every eye on them, right? And you're trying to make sure that you don't fall over them or fall on them, or, right. And it's like, and you're trying, right. It's like massive chaos, right? And then your wife turns to you and goes, what, call W Disney and ask them what time the 3 o'clock thing is, right? You don't think in terms of, well, it's, you know what I mean? You got your eye on them. I can only imagine some of the stupid things that I've asked over the years of people at Disney. I haven't even, wow. That's just, that really, yep. There you go. I'm one of those, just so you know.
And that's fine.
So let me ask you this. Working at Disney the first time, what was the most important thing you learned?
Safety, courtesy, show, efficiency. Those are the 4 Disney standards. I still remember them to this day. How many years is that later? And that's the order in which, as a cast member, you're supposed to engage with the guests.
Right.
So safety first, as always, because obviously if it's not safe, it's really not a good experience.
Right.
Courtesy, even if the worst things happen, be nice. Show means, what does the presentation look like? And I still use that phrase to this day. If I'm doing like a training class, I'm doing an online webinar or keynote, I'm like, what's the show look like? I want it to be like a really engaging, enjoyable show.
Yeah.
And then efficiency. Once you get the show down, how can you continuously process, improve it to make the operation be that much more efficient? And I think that's actually a cool way to think about any operation that you have.
Yeah. And that's awesome, man. I love that. Okay. So at some point you leave, according to you leave Walt Disney World. Where do you go and why?
Well, so I decided, like, you know what, I'm going to make a go of this. First time I've really lived any farther away from my parents in an hour and a half, and all my friends. And so, I'm like, yeah, I'm getting this. So as I said, I drove down in my little Ford Escort, which didn't really have a lot of furniture in it, pretty much none. So I was sleeping on a futon.
There's no room for furniture.
There's no for, it's an Escort. There's not a lot going on there. And I said, you know what, I'm going to buy a bed. And so I went to, the Disney cast member had our own little newspaper, and we could, people would do one ads there. And so I was driving to get a bed. And so I'm going into this person's place, their apartment, they're selling the bed, and I get into a near fatal car accident. I was okay. I should not have been. My little Ford Escort just got totaled. 5 cars. It was horrible. Right near Universal Studios, as irony would have it. And so I move home, or I go to the hospital and they check me out and all the good stuff. Friend picks me up. Ernie the Escort is totaled. He's gone. And then that next day, I wake up and I'm sleeping on a futon, and not like a nice futon. It was basically one of those like where it was foam. It just folded out and you fold it back in as a couch. So I'm sleeping on a foam cushion, and I roll out of bed, which is really like 6 inches off the ground, and I hear and feel squish. And our toilet had blown up over the night. My roommate and I didn't know it. And so here I am now, what little things I did have, which were sitting still in cardboard boxes on the floor, which now that wasn't really doing so well. They're soaking up the water.
Right.
And so I knock on my roommate's door, and he comes out, and I'm like, wait, our front door's open. We'd also gotten robbed that same night. And the only prized possession I had, aside from my Ernie Escort, which was now totaled, was my mountain bike, and that was gone. So I'm just like, okay, I just had 3 strikes already. This is not cool. And so, I just kind of did a self-assessment, now without a car. And I'm like, Mom, Pa, can I come back up? And they're like, sure. So I moved back up with my parents. And as irony would have it, this is right about the time I'm starting to figure out my authentic self. I didn't realize I was gay throughout undergrad, dated women, I was fine. And then, the little lights finally started clicking in, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm now living with my parents, figuring out I might like boys. This is weird. And so I end up, moving back in with them, and got a job doing marketing for a small credit union. And it was just an interesting time in my life, but it was really sorting out my own self, trying to figure out also vocationally what the heck I wanted to do, because that whole Disney dream failed. My car's gone. Oh, I may not be the person who I thought I was growing up. And so it was, I was very fortunate that at least I had a roof over my head, and I had food, I had a job. I was bequeathed a car from a relative who had passed away. It was not the fanciest car in the world, but it had 4 wheels and a steering wheel, and it drove.
Right.
And so, I was really trying to figure out what was the next phase in my life. So that was about a year that I kind of did that, just shy of a year for that experience.
So you worked in marketing.
I did.
And then at some point you decide to move to a different job.
Yes.
What job did you move to, and why?
So we had bought this at this small credit union doing marketing. We had bought this software, which was actually a precursor to CRM, if you know that term. Like if you're listening to this or watching, Salesforce is a CRM, customer relationship management. Well, this was like way back in the DOS days, but we bought it for the small credit union, where we pull all the data, we'd able to do queries and find out who was really profitable, who wasn't. So this company came to teach myself and the director of marketing how to use the software. And I picked it up really, really fast, like crazy fast. I've always been pretty good with computers and stuff. I think it's the math mind there. And at one point, the trainer pulled me aside. She's like, if you ever want a job, like, you're really good at this. So now I'm getting back to the whole teaching thing again. Ever want to be a trainer for us? Here's my card. Let me know. And the card read Orlando, Florida. As irony would have it, their office was 4 blocks from my old apartment that got flooded. So I was like, that's weird. So I'm doing the software, working. I started to apply to grad schools because I knew that was something I kind of wanted to do. And then they end up calling me and said, hey, we know we gave you the card. We have an opening. We really want to bring you down to Florida and interview you. I'm like,
right.
Okay. And I'm thinking, hey, free trip to Orlando. I can see my friends from Disney. Cool. I had no expectations to take this job.
Right.
So I flew down for the weekend, and I'm leaving the airport. This is so me. And this is why I can do resilience and teach resiliency in times of change, because I actually have been quite resilient. So I'm leaving the airport, and I totaled the rental car. It wasn't my fault. This woman was in the wrong lane. She's using the turning lane as a driving lane. She slams into me. And I was like, oh man, I'm on my way to a job interview. So I call them up, and they're like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. The car's not. They're like, just sort it out, go to the hotel, and we'll figure it out. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, that's fine. And so that all takes place. I get to the hotel, call them. They're like, you know what? Hey, why don't we just do the interview on Monday? Extend the weekend on us. I said, no, I'm cool. Let's just do this now and have a go at it. And that's actually the reason I got the job. They're like, we figured when we'd send you out in the field to go.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.